Welcome back to the Mina Show featuring Lenny, the only NFL podcast. One of the hosts thinks 3-4 is about the time he starts begging for dinner. That's Lenny. I'm Mina Kimes. It's really actually 2-3. 2:30 is when he's agitating earlier and earlier every day.
A 2-3. Who runs? I mean, I feel like the Cardinals at times and the Vikings run some version of 2-3 on occasion.
Yeah. The Vikings are I suspect the Vikings will come up today because that voice you just heard, Domonique Foxworth and I, are going to be picking our top 10 defenses of 2025. Last week did offenses with Ben Solak. So Domonique, last week Ben and I had 9 of the same 10 teams. Offenses, but the point I want to make is offenses tend to be a little more consistent. Defenses are all over the place. We have not talked. I suspect we are going to have some very different teams, some similar teams, but some very different teams on our list.
That's what made it hard, because it kind of felt like that drill that we do every year in the preseason where we're like, hey, every year this amount of new teams get into the postseason and this amount of old teams are out, and you're kind of just like randomly guessing. Like part of this drill was like, so who's just gonna mess around and get a bunch of interceptions next year? And who's gonna not repeat the amount of sacks they had and still have a lot of pressures and have a bad defense? Part of that felt like, which was nice. It gave me a little room to just pick some guys that I like.
Yeah, you're weighing a lot of things, one of which is regression, which I think we're going to talk about with a few of these teams. Health factors into that, of course. Opponents factor into it. Ultimately, though, like talent to me is the overriding factor in most of my decisions, talent and coaching. But before we get started, I want to read the top 10 defenses in DVOA from last year, just to give people some context. It goes Philadelphia, Minnesota, Houston, Denver, Detroit. That might surprise some people. Baltimore, Green Bay, Pittsburgh, the Chargers, the Seahawks. And then just outside were the Bills, Chiefs, and Niners.
Can I ask you a quick question before we go?
Yeah.
As a matter of process, how much did you factor in how good the offense was on the team, the defense that you chose?
I considered it a little bit.
Okay, not much.
Not much. Yeah, it's definitely, that brings up the question of like when we say top 10 defenses, what are we talking about? Are we looking at there was one defense that I really weighed whether or not including, and the offense being bad actually did affect my decision because I think the offense being bad really hurt them last year. I'm not going to say who that is. I don't want to spoil. You might be able to guess. But yeah, and look, like when I say opponent matters, I'm not really weighing that much. We're really trying to weigh these defenses, these units in a vacuum.
And DVOA like tries to take that into consideration, and EPA also
similar though. The EPA list is pretty similar.
Yeah, it is.
Success rate has a few differences. Those are the main things I look at the start. All right, let's just get right into it. So I was deciding between 2 defenses for my number 1, and I went back and forth.
You're starting at number 1. Okay, not a countdown, a count up. Okay, yeah.
No, Ben and I talked about this last week. I think I'm the only podcast that starts at number 1.
I think that I could guess the 2 defenses that you are picking between. It's the Ravens and the Eagles would be my guess. No? Neither. The Seahawks? Who else could it be?
Wow, already some disagreement. I went with the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, that's a fair one. This is why I asked the question about offense weighing into it, because I don't know how much Bo Nix you believe. No, they have a great running game. I don't know how much Bo Nix you believe in, but yeah.
I think that's actually a good point because I think like some of the 2 teams you mentioned both benefit from playing with really good offenses. I think for me, it's like, is the offense like awful to the point where the defense, and I don't think that's the case with Denver. I think the defense is, at minimum, or the offense, pardon me, is at minimum going to be average. That's my personal view. But so I was going between Denver and another team. So before I explain why I picked Denver, where did you have Denver?
All right, let me see. My list, Denver Broncos, number 5.
Okay. So we're still in the top 5. So my overarching case here, this defense was first in EPA per play, first in success rate, second in pressure rate with and without blitzing,
Yeah.
second in pass rush win rate, first in sack rate. They were good against the pass and against the run. And I think they got better, right? Like I loved their free agency so much because I think they attacked all of their weaknesses on defense in a pretty smart great way. I would argue they upgraded at multiple important positions, starting with linebacker Dre Greenlaw, which I think was the biggest weakness of the defense. We can talk about that in a little bit. Really struggled to defend passes to running backs for this reason. That was one of their very few weaknesses. Bringing in Talanoa Hufanga, who's this
Hmm.
ball hawking safety. I really liked that pick as well. And then drafting Jade Barron, who comes in. This is an unbelievable secondary,
Yeah.
Dominique. And I,
Yeah.
I really, really, and they're really well coached by Vance Joseph. I went back and forth a little bit, but ultimately, I just think they're both really, really talented and really, really deep and really well coached.
Yeah, I mean, and they're good in the important positions, the tough positions to find players. They have a great edge, and they have more than two really good cornerbacks, which they're a man heavy defense, which gives them the
Yeah.
flexibility to blitz when they need to. So I think it's a inarguably good choice. I think the reason why I was a little hesitant is because turnovers and factor so much into like the EPA per play and all that sort of stuff. And I don't
Yeah.
imagine that this is a team that's going to create a lot of turnovers because man coverage is tougher to get interceptions, and you're going to get more turnovers when you have leads, you force sack fumbles and that sort of stuff. So that type of stuff, I think, is where I kind of just dinged them a little bit. I think they'll be as good as anyone, but will they have the best season? I don't know.
Yeah, the turnovers is a really interesting thing to look at for, and there's a few defenses on my list we're going to talk about where I actually one of them in particular it really affected my thinking about the defense. One thing I like to look at, you talked about, so turnovers affect EPA per play a lot because obviously if you turn the ball over, you're robbing them of a scoring opportunity. So I like to look at that in success rate together, and the fact that they
Right.
were first in success
Yeah.
rate, which is more just like what are you doing on first, second, third down, etc. This is just there was nothing fake
Yeah.
about this defense. I also, by the way, I talked about the secondary. I mean, I don't think I've gotten to talk about the Jade Barron pick. I think it's so nasty getting to play. Like he's so versatile and such a good tackler. But this front, if I had like one question mark, I was like, well, do they have really good pass rushers? Do they have a really elite pass rusher? I think Nick Bonito was excellent. He really like
Mhm.
broke out last year. They paid Jonathan Cooper, but I actually think Zach Allen and Jonathan Franklin Myers,
Mhm.
every single defensive lineman they have is at minimum very good. And so it's like, well, they're all really good. The biggest weakness was linebacker, and they addressed that. So if I had to have one concern, I think it would maybe be Dre Greenlaw coming off of the injury. He's supposed to be back for camp, but yeah, I don't know. I was extremely high on the Denver Broncos, and I was deciding between them and another team, which you didn't mention. So who is your first overall team? Because I'm assuming it's one of the ones that you mentioned.
Yeah, I went with the Eagles because I love their secondary, and they have a game changer up front. While their defensive front isn't as good as it had or has isn't as effective as it has been in recent history. It's funny how they made this transition from a defensive line led defense to what I would see as more of a secondary led defense. They still have an unblockable defensive lineman in a secondary that's incredible. And then I think I factored in the offensive ability into my
Yeah,
decisions a lot
that's a
more
good
than you
one.
did, where I was like, these guys are going to be. And they don't play a ton of man. They play a really flexible version of cover four that they can do a bunch of different things for that, like I imagine would put them in situation when Carter gets pressure to get turnovers with defensive backs that have good hands. So it was a bit of projection, but them and the Ravens were my top two, and in large part
Wait,
because their
yeah, don't
offenses are
don't don't
really
get
good.
into the Ravens. Yeah, oh yeah, okay, so yeah,
Right.
because the Ravens are also near the top for me. So I had the Eagles at 4.
Okay.
I'm getting a lot of hate from Eagles fans this offseason because I think it started with my Jalen Hurts ranking in the quarterback rankings pod. But I actually think given the fact that they've lost let me pull this up, 2 of their top 4 pressure getters in Milton Williams and Josh Sweat, dropping only to 4 is pretty good. Um,
I mean, my only pushback there is like they
yeah,
weren't getting like I looked at a bunch of the stats from week 9 on to try to get a better look at teams, and they had the best defense by EPA per
Oh,
play
yeah.
from week 9
It
on. But hold on, with a 22nd in the league pressure rate and a
oh,
27th in the league sack rate. So like they were effective without getting that pressure, which is why I didn't think as much about them losing their pressure getters.
the other thing I would say is, like, Jalix Hunt and Moro Jomo did look really good, particularly end
Mhm.
of the year. Ojomo in particular, was excellent in the final 2 games, and from week 12 on was 5th amongst all defensive tackles in pressure rate. Milton he was 13th in pass rush when Milton Williams was 3rd. So, the other thing is I would say, like, I really trust this staff's ability to coach up, evaluate defensive linemen. I also like the guys they drafted. I mean, you guys have heard me talk about Jihad Campbell. I think having they're suddenly incredibly deep at linebacker. Like, even if Zach Bond takes a tiny step back from being the best linebacker in the NFL last year, suddenly you've got Campbell and Trotter and N'Kobe Dean. Like, they're really deep at that position. I think if I had a concern, I also really like Andrew Makuba, who is your CJ Gardner Johnson replacement, who I think
Mhm.
is kind of similar play style, very great player. I think if I had a concern, it would just be edge and like, do we feel good about Nolan Smith as a one, as the best edge rusher on this team? Things are different when you're not like 20 dudes deep, waves of guys.
Yeah.
And then I would say the other cornerback position, opposite Quinion Mitchell, would be Kaylee Ringo, who I'm not an enormous fan of, to be honest. But the fact that they have Vic Fangio, this is year 2. Now you've got guys in the building who have played in his defense. There's continuity there.
Mhm.
And they're just so fundamentally sound. Like you said, this is not a defense that's like dependent on getting a ton of pressure. So
Yeah.
4 might end up looking silly, but it's not that
No,
far
I
down.
mean, it won't look silly because I mean, 4 is still great. Like all these defenses are going to be pretty close. It's no way that it, or I mean, I think the only way it looks silly is if it's much worse. Like I don't think there's a huge difference between the first best defense and the fourth best defense, but I guess we'll see.
Um, so you had Baltimore 2. I
Uh-huh.
had them 3. So very close. We could talk about them in a second. Surprise. So you have okay, Philadelphia, Baltimore. You had Denver 5,
Hmm.
who had 1.
Yeah.
Okay, so my second overall team, I think, is in your top 5. Houston Texans.
6. Yeah.
Wow, really?
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm. I mean,
No, no, I
never
don't know. We're
mind,
splitting
never
hairs.
mind.
No, no,
I
no,
feel like I have
it's
to defend
good.
myself. I
You
already
should.
feel like I need to defend myself against my sliding the Broncos down as far as they did, and now I feel like I need to defend
No, I
myself
love
against the
this. This is
Texans.
good. There's more disagreement here than last time. This is excellent. Okay. My general so the Texans last year were 3rd in DVOA against both the pass and the run. They were extremely balanced defense. They were 2nd in success rate, 1st in pass rush win, 4th in yards per play. I think for me, this was really just like so unbelievably talented in the front and on the back end. And you have a really, really good defensive coach in D'Amico Ryans. If I had a question, it'd probably be at the linebacker position. And I think that some certain teams were able to go after that a little bit. But structurally, like this is maybe the least I would say put the Broncos in this category. Smoke and mirrorsy
Right.
defense. Like D'Amico Ryans is a really, really good coach, and he makes some really, really timely pressure calls. But this defense to me is the most like our dudes are just better than you defense, right? The swarm mentality they called it. The pass rush is just terrifying. And then you've got a bunch of ball hawks in the back end. And oh, by the way, the guys that they drafted looked really good too.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't count. They are 5th, not
Okay,
6th.
fifth.
But I mean,
So where do you have
again,
Denver then?
it's not a huge defense. I think Denver is 4th. Sorry, I should have put numbers next to them. I just started counting down and messed up.
Okay.
Uh,
So you
but yeah,
had
so I mean, it's not.
Philadelphia, Baltimore, 3 is a mystery.
Oh yeah, I mean,
And then Denver, and then Houston at 5. I had Houston at 2. Okay, so
right.
far we're still all in this top 5 together with the
Yeah.
same 5 teams. Okay, talk to me about Houston.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said everything needs to be said about Houston. It's not much to break down about them. I think they have again. two edges that will require defenses to prepare for them, and they got Stingley, who is arguably one of the best corners in the league. I mean, not arguably. He is one of the best corners in the league, arguably the best corner in the league that makes plays and gives them the flexibility to do things. Like it's not particularly it's D'Amico Ryans. It's what the 49ers used to be. Like it's not particularly complicated. It's not tricky. They're going to go out there and hit people and play pretty sound defense and frankly dare you to beat them. It's very different from what I would say a team that we've already talked about, like the Eagles. I think the Eagles are going to be very game plan dependent, and it'll be a very
Yeah.
a four structure, but they're going to tweak that cover four. It's a lot more mental gymnastics for them than it is for the Texans.
One of the things that, I wanted to ask you about, so I was looking at all the things that the Texans were, like, top 4 in most metrics. One of the things they struggled with, and some of this had to do with playing Baltimore a couple times or once, and then but yeah, in the playoffs as well. Scrambling quarterbacks, some of that I think is structural. But the other thing that I thought was interesting that I wanted to talk to you about was they were actually bottom 5 in red zone. So
Hmm.
they were really, really, really good. And I was wondering if you thought that might be something that has to do with their players, or if you think that's just something that's gonna regress, and because red zone's very interesting to me year to year.
Yeah, I mean, red zone, I think is a cousin to turnovers in that it's sometimes hard to predict, but good teams tend to also create turnovers, and good teams tend to be good in the red zone. I think there's less opportunity to scheme against defense in the red zone. Like there's less room. That's when we kind of boil it down to our guys got to be better than your guys. There's only so many different, or there's only so many ways you can challenge a defense when you can't stretch a defense. So I think red zone is probably a pretty good metric to determine how good your defense is going to be. And it's as far as points allowed, or excuse me, as far as points added is concerned, like yeah, plays down there have a lot of impact on the score, which is all that
Right.
really matters. So yeah.
Is there anything that held you back from putting this unit in your top 3? Because I had them 2, and I was considering them for 1, 'cause I'm just like
Yeah.
elite four-man rush, elite secondary,
Right.
elite coach.
We didn't talk about Lassiter as the other corner
Oh,
who's
he's so good.
is very good. They add Chauncey Gardner Johnson, who I think as a is an incredible personality fit
He's
for
such a good
for this team. Him and Al Shair on the same defense out there flying at people is going to have you thinking twice about running the ball or catching in the middle of the field or scrambling if you're a quarterback, obviously.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's no reason. I guess this is the hard part. Like, I guess the middle of their defensive line is a little suspect,
Fair.
but
Yeah.
it's the hard part about yeah, this is an exercise in splitting hairs. So like yeah, like I think they could be the best defense in football. They could also be the fifth best defense in football. The
Yeah.
same is true for the
I'm
Broncos.
just wondering, if there's anything that gave you a little pause, because like I said, with the Eagles, the thing that gave me pause was the loss of talent, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
and there was something I think now like I with Denver and Houston, I think the reason I had them at 1 and 2 was like nothing has really given me pause about these depth chart. I just thought the depth charts were so stacked. Um, okay, so to recap, my 1 is Denver, my 2 is Houston, my 4 is Philadelphia, and my 3 is Baltimore. Sorry, 3 is Baltimore, 4 is Philadelphia. Your 1 was Philadelphia. Your 2 was Baltimore. We have not revealed your 3. Your 4 is Denver. Your 5 is Houston. So far we have all the same teams. However, we have not revealed my 5 and your 3. Okay, so let's talk about Baltimore. 2 and 3. So very close here. Um, so you said something when I texted you about doing this pod, we talked a little bit about the stats you were looking at. You mentioned first and second half splits.
Mhm.
And, this was something we talked about a lot during the regular season. Everybody's talked about this, how Baltimore basically saved their season halfway through. But I don't think, like, maybe people appreciate it wasn't just stopping the bleeding.
Mhm.
They turned from being an absolute liability in pass defense to, in the second half of last season, being first in EPA per play, first in success rate, first in opponents' points per game. So, this isn't like a, "Okay, we just need to be average" situation. They became, I would say, next to Philadelphia, the second best defense in football. Uh, there is some, change now. Brandon Stevens is out.
Mhm.
Baltimore was 29th in DVOA versus number 1 wide receivers last year, which is sadly a Brandon Stevens stat. Uh, Jair Alexander is in. Ardarius Washington is lost for the season, who was the safety. They pivoted to him in Hamilton, but they drafted Malachi Starks. They also drafted Mike Green as a pass rusher in the second round. How do you feel about this defense this year versus last year?
I mean, I feel much better about this defense this year versus last year. I think another year for Zach Orr is better because he was a first year coordinator last year. Um, while he was getting support from people around him, I think that that's going to improve quite a bit. And to your point, like this team became really good because their secondary got really good. Their secondary got better,
Yeah,
assuming Alexander can stay healthy and Malachi Starks is as good as we think he is. The major knocks against this defense is like the they don't have like a guy. I guess Meta BK is their best pass rusher,
yeah.
but he's not a raw pass rusher. He's a tackle. So I think that's the biggest knock. But this is another team that's really tricky and they get away with not blitzing because they're so versatile in the secondary that they create these simulated pressures that impact impact the offense the same way a blitz would without them compromising their coverage. And yeah, with the versatility that Starks gives them with Hamilton and obviously Wiggins and Humphrey, because Humphrey plays in the slot and he obviously can play deep half or quarters, like that versatility. Um, I think makes this defense really good. And then again, the value that I've included in this that it seems like you have not nearly as much is
The offense, yeah.
they're gonna be
I
playing
agree.
with
Yeah.
leads.
I have him third, I'm very high on them. Yeah, I the pressure thing is really interesting to me,
Yeah.
because the first 2 defenses I had, I think, they have better pass rushers
Yeah.
generally, but Baltimore, one stat I really like, or a combination of stats, is they were 3rd in both sack and pressure rate, but 29th in ESPN's pass rush win. So, just for those who don't know, pass rush win is basically, are you beating your blocker in 2.5 seconds or less? It's trying to just look at, in a vacuum, each individual rusher. And that is a great way of illustrating how effective their simulated pressures are, right? Like those guys, they're not, and some of that has to do with, by the way, the style. It's less of an attacking defense, so
Mhm.
that I think can also affect pass rush win. But the way they get pressure is very schemed up. Now, I think that raises the question of like, okay, is this sustainable? But I would argue they've been doing it now for so long that it is. And I also think the rushers, while they're not like studs, like always good.
Yeah.
Who, by
And
the way,
Van
got
Noy is good.
jacked.
Yeah.
I found out he got jacked this summer. Did you see
Oh,
that?
did
He
he?
gained like
I did.
25 pounds of muscle. Yeah, we'll see.
Oh,
Uh,
I mean, I was thinking 1990 slang. I thought somebody
oh
jacked
no,
him. I was
no,
like, oh.
no. You got jacked, not jacked up, or not jacked in that way. Anyways, yeah, Van Noy, Owe Green. I'm actually a little bit worried about nose. Michael Pierce retired. Travis
Mhm.
Jones is a really good rusher, but I feel like they could have used a little bit of. I'm sure they'll find some like gigantic veteran that we forgot as a free agent to sign. But I love the versatility they added to the secondary, and I know there's people screaming at home, "Oh, the 3 games Jair Alexander is healthy."
Yeah.
They don't need him to be healthy the entire season. It would be great, but, like, this wasn't a desperation. They have Awuzie, who I know is, not as good as he used to be. They have TJ Tampa, who's played for them some. But I think that, like, top to bottom, Alexander, Wiggins, Humphrey, who's a slot now, Hamilton, and Starks, it's just such a fun, versatile,
Yeah.
interesting group,
And
so
it's the point that you were making. So when I first started doing a little research for this, I looked at the season long numbers, and then I decided that that was less useful than the split of the second half of the season. And what happened to their pressure rate and their sack rate from mid
Woo.
season on is like that was the to your point. We focus on them eliminating explosive plays, which is part of it, but it also feels like they got better. Uh, coaching and preparation
Yeah.
and scheme, like that was part of it also. So yeah, that's the story of the season, and there's no reason, at least to me, to believe that that's going to go away.
All right. So we're missing my 5
Hmm.
and your 3 because you had
Yeah.
right, your first 2. Okay.
Um,
Uh,
is it the same?
Reveal it.
Yeah, I got the
Okay, we'll say it on
Seahawks.
3. You have the Seahawks!
Yeah, I like the
Okay,
Seahawks.
I have the Seahawks at 6.
Okay.
So not that far off. I love that you have the Seahawks here. I have the Minnesota Vikings at 5,
Yeah, the
who
Vikings.
are
Yeah.
also in your top 10, I imagine, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely in my top 10. I feel a little bad about where they landed in my top 10, but yeah,
Okay.
they're in my top 10.
Let's do the Seahawks. So I have them at 6, but you have them at 3? Wow.
Yeah,
Dude, the
yeah.
Seahawks at 3. Okay.
And this, I guess, this flies in the face of me leaning on how good the offenses have been. But this is the team. Again, it feels like, at least for me, looking at my top teams, I am very partial, unsurprisingly, to secondaries that are really good. And I feel that way about the Seahawks
More consistent
secondary.
year to year
Yeah,
than pass
they
rush.
they are really good and very consistent. Um, Bringing in Demarcus Lawrence, I guess. I mean, he falls into the Jair Alexander case where, like, if he's healthy, that'll be nice. But they still have Leonard Williams up front. But it's really a lot about a year later in the Mike McDonald system, which it took
Yeah.
a little bit to get adjusted to, and we saw what happened in Baltimore once they got comfortable in that system. There's no reason for me to believe that they won't. And towards the end of the year, they were one of the best defenses in football.
Mhm.
And there's no reason for me to believe there's no flaw on this roster that makes me think, or in their coaching staff that makes me think that they're going to get worse. So I think they're going to get better. And I love their secondary.
I love their secondary too. The Seahawks were the other team other than Baltimore where there was really a dramatic split in the second
Hmm.
half. For them, it was after the bye. They had a bye, and then after the bye, they finished top 10 in DVOA overall.
All
But
right.
after the bye, they were 5th in EPA per play, 8th in success rate, 5th in yards per play. You saw dramatic improvement, especially in run defense, where they really struggled against the run, and they went to being top 10, 5th in EPA in the second half of the season. And for if you're looking at competition, they played the Cardinals. They played good running
Hmm.
teams, so it's not like entirely because of competition. That was a lot of that coincided with they made dramatic change at linebacker in the season, right? They traded for Ernest Jones. Tyrese Knight, who was a rookie, becomes the other starting linebacker. But I think to your point, some of it also had to do with like the Mike McDonald factor
Yeah.
and kind of figuring out, the players have talked about how they had to kind of get accustomed to the little nuances of his defense, communication up front in particular. And I agree with you. I think like year 2, what's not like there's so much continuity here. And they brought in some vets, I think, to add depth at multiple positions. But I think like the core of the defense, really good defensive tackle room. Byron Murphy, the first round draft pick, like didn't even play that much because they ended up being so he played a decent amount, but they were so
Hmm.
deep. I've a lot of talent,
Yeah.
honestly, and I think top 3, yeah, like it's totally defensible. I had 6, maybe try not to be a homer, but I love you picking the Seahawks here.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to pick them because I didn't want to give you I guess I wanted them to be behind. I wanted to put them behind wherever you put them so I could make fun of you. But you all obviously were in your head like, man, I can't put them too high because 6 with that talent, that
I
coach, that's not fair.
I feel like okay, so somebody might look at this and say, okay, there's a lot of really good players. Are there stars? Devin Witherspoon, I think, gets a lot of attention, and he's had the accolades. But I kind of feel like Leo Williams this
Yeah.
season was slept on.
Yeah.
I
Oh
hope
yeah.
people right, like he was a monster last year. Took over game 5th in pass rush win rate, by the way, amongst defensive tackles. And outside of him, like, so he's the star, like you said, but Demarcus Lawrence, Uchenna Nwosu coming back from injury, Boye Mafe, Derek Hall. It's not world beaters. There's no Miles Garrett on the roster, but those are all good pass rushers.
Mhm.
I think like good enough. And again, this is kind of similar to Baltimore in that
Yep.
they play a lot of games up front. So maybe you don't need like a stud.
Yeah, I think that was my rationale is that the coach can compensate for that. It feels as though there's no way to compensate for weaknesses in secondary since they don't really have weaknesses that helps. But the Sims seem to be a good way to create pressure for teams that seem sustainable, especially when you have a smart coach.
I also one more thing is on Witherspoon. I think it's so important right now to have a nickel
Yeah.
who is versatile, can play the run, can blitz. I'm doing a offensive trends pod with Dan Orlovsky, and one thing I want to talk about is how it's become such a condensed formation league.
Mhm.
And I think having a slot like him who can send pressure is such a it's become a really, really significant chess piece for
Mhm.
defenses like Seattle. So, okay, the Vikings. You said you feel bad. So wait, tell me where you had them. Look at your list. So I had them at 5. Um, going from
The
oh no,
Vikings are 6.
why do you feel bad about
No.
having
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
not that far down?
No,
6.
because I guess I feel bad about my process is I came into it knowing that they were a blitz heavy team and was like, hey, that's not sustainable. And then I found myself looking for ways to demote them. And so the first thing that I did, which I did for all the teams, but um I controlled for blitz to see if they still had a high EPA per play, and the Vikings still were very good when not
Yeah.
blitzing. And so I guess that's why I felt bad because when my strategy to figure out why I didn't, I came in with a preconceived notion, and they disproved my preconceived notion, and I still didn't put them in the top 5. I guess is why I ended up feeling bad.
I mean, I had the 5th, so we're pretty
Yeah.
aligned. And by the way, we have the exact same top 6 defenses,
Mhm.
which I don't think it'll be the same after the turn. So the Vikings last year were second in DVOA, third in EPA per play, fourth in success rate. They turned over the ball a bunch.
Yeah.
I think there's an interesting discussion to have though about how much of that is a product of the absolute chaos that they show quarterbacks. This is a very talked about this a lot unusual defense in terms of the way they blitz. They so the average NFL defense zone blitzed on 12.9% of dropbacks. The Vikings did it nearly 30% of the time. They played primarily split safety behind that. They also had some really funky looks in terms of like the amount of people they put on the defensive line. So, you could argue that their high interception rate is unlikely to regress too much because so much of it was due to scheme and confusion and guys being where quarterbacks didn't think they were going to be. Um, I so they did change a little bit the roster. The interior of the defensive line was basically nothing for them. So they went out and they signed 2 players who were once great in Jonathan
Mhm.
Allen and Javon Hargrave, but are both coming off of injuries. Otherwise, it's a pretty similar group returning. I like this front a lot. I feel really good about the front 7. I have serious concerns about the cornerback group and how much you can protect them with the scheme.
Yeah. So I mean, Gilmore's gone, and the scheme does include a good amount of zero, is they have to run it in order for the looks that they show to be believable and concerning at times. So like that's going to be a problem when they. I think they got Jeff Okuda starting right
I
now.
don't know if he's starting. I mean, so
Okay,
yeah, it's a question. I think this is gonna be a
right.
lot of Isaiah Rodgers, who was the Eagles' backup, Makai Blackman, who was hurt last year. Their CB1 is Byron Murphy Jr., who I think should be like a CB2 in a really good defense.
Yeah. The other thing that jumped out to me was their explosive plays. They gave up a good amount, which I guess you could expect for the type of defense that they ran. They gave up
Yeah.
more explosive plays than you would like for a high ranking defense. But yeah, I think to your point again with the secondary, that's a concern when you're going to run a defense that requires you to put your corners in tough spots enough times that they believe that you'll do it. Like Stephon Gilmore was a really important player for them last year, and it seems like he's gone. So I don't know
Yeah.
what the answer is there.
Cam Bynum is also gone. I should
Yeah,
have
he
mentioned
was
that.
had almost all their interception. Felt like I saw him doing a new dance every week.
Josh Metellus, I think, is the best player back there. He's their kind of versatile. He plays nickel. He plays everything. But There's some talent lost. They're betting, I think, on more talent up front. It'll be interesting to see if that leads to any adjustment in how Brian Flores calls the defense, if he leans a little bit more on his front four to get pressure, if one of Allen or Hargrave come back, you know, and look anything like they did at their peaks. But I don't mean to sound like I have them 5. I'm not bagging on them. I think that I'm just
Yeah.
explaining the secondary was why I kind of pushed them down a little bit, but they retained their defensive coordinator, who's one of the 2 or 3 best in
Oh,
football.
yeah.
I think it's important. There's continuity here. You have guys in the system who have been playing in this defense for a while and
Yeah, I mean,
uh,
Van Ginkel and Grenard are still really
great players.
good players, yeah.
Dallas Turner barely did anything last year. Their first round draft pick. There's still potential there. Really good defense. I think this is the offense. Even if they take a step back, I think it'll still be at least average. That's just my perception. So I'm not digging them for that. All right, let's take a quick break, come back, and find out if we have any different teams in our final 4. All right, we are back. So to recap, my top 4 were Denver, Houston, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Minnesota. And then so that was my top 5, pardon me. And then Seattle was 6. Your top 6 were Philadelphia, Baltimore, Seattle, Denver, Houston, Minnesota. So not that different. All right. Number 7, I'll go first.
Okay.
I am really excited about this defense. I have the Detroit Lions.
Oh, nice. I mean, statistically, they were better when I was doing this exercise. They were better last year than I remember them being. Um, it's such a losing Carlton Davis doesn't like
Okay, so yes, that was probably
he was so good for them.
so good.
Yeah.
Dead last in adjusted games lost to injuries, unsurprisingly.
Mhm.
Despite that, you alluded to this. I think they're a defense where people look at their season long stats would be shocked. And even if you
Yeah.
split it to after the Aiden Hutchinson injury, they didn't really drop off that dramatically. Ultimately finished 4th in DVOA versus the pass, which I think would surprise people. 6th in EPA per play, 1st in third down defense. So I have to think they're going to be healthier than last
Mhm.
year. It starts there. You get Hutchinson back, who before he went out was
Incredible.
arguably the first or second best pass rusher in the NFL. They added, yes, you lose Carlton Davis, but you add DJ Reed, who is at minimum a competent cover corner at minimum, and it's Rake Straw, who will hopefully be healthy. You have year 2, Terry and Arnold,
Mhm.
outrageously good safety group, really good linebacker group. I thought Jack Campbell was a lot better last year than before. Super deep at defensive tackle. DJ Reader or Lynn McNeil comes back. Drafted Tyleek Williams, Levi Onwuzurike. I mean, it's really talented.
Yeah.
So I think you lose also your defensive coordinator,
Yeah.
Aaron Glenn. That's a big loss. But my case for them starts with health, and then I think just looking at the depth chart, I felt really good about all 3 levels of this defense.
Yeah, their starting point was much higher than I expected it to be with all the injuries. I think it's a fair assumption that an unhealthy team was still very good on defense last year without their best player. It does stand to reason that they would be even better this year. But you can also argue that a team that's been ravaged by injuries and still has success is probably a reflection on their coaching. And he's gone. So like that to
It's a big
me
loss.
is a bit of a concern. Um, that staff, and I know DJ Reed's very good. He was better than Sauce Gardner last year while on the Jets for that season. But at least to my knowledge, I don't think of DJ Reed as like a shut down man corner, which is the way that they want to play there. I think Terry and Arnold may grow into something. He was a lot of penalties last year, but like I really liked him as a player. Like he
Yeah.
showed glimpses. It's a hard position to play, and he showed that I think he'll be able to play. He'll be a starter in this league at that position.
Something I found interesting when I was digging into the Lions is, I think maybe a little bit slept on because we think about them losing Aiden Hutchinson and injuries in the secondary, is that they really were not great against the run. In fact, they were better in most metrics against the pass than the run. Third in EPA versus the pass, um, 16th versus the run. And then when you dig in further, they really just were not good at the line of scrimmage. They were almost dead last in yards. This is actually, I thought, an interesting stat. They were 31st in yards before contact per carry and first in yards after contact per carry against the run. So they were good at tackling, but they weren't getting any run stuffs. Now, some of that is structural. There's a variety of reasons for that, but it kind of, I think, helps you get at the Tyleik Williams draft pick a little bit more, who's the gigantic Ohio State defensive tackle that they drafted, because I think that they recognized that this was an issue with the team.
Just a random, or not random question, but a question that's not about the Lions specifically. But is it just the turnovers in red zone? Like, what is it that makes defenses um a little less sticky from year to year? What's the statistical reason for why defenses, or is it just random? Because sometimes a good defense will drop in a way that offenses don't.
Yeah, it's a great question. I
I don't
think
know the answer.
turnovers is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Maybe great defensive performance statistically has a lot to do with like situational football. So maybe to your
Hmm.
point, I should have paid more attention to the offenses, which is another point in the Lions' favor, right?
Hmm.
Um, I would say also perhaps the biggest reason is that so much of offensive performance is based on the quarterback.
Oh yeah,
And if your
gotcha.
quarterback, like it's the sun
Right, that
of the
makes
solar
sense.
system. Yeah. And so like there's no quarterback of the defense.
Right,
Even defenses with a great player like a Miles Garrett
right,
can really dramatically swing from year to
right,
year in a way that like an offense, pardon me, with Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes will never be bad.
right. No,
That's
that
probably
makes
the biggest thing.
that
Yeah.
makes more sense. There's the quarterback is going to be the center of all your offensive plays, and there are a lot of things that can determine who is the focal point of a defensive play. That makes sense. I like that.
Did you have Detroit in your top 10?
I didn't.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
So I have
yeah,
Detroit 7.
right.
Dominique does not have them in their top 10. Who do you have at 7?
Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Wow, not in my top 10.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, we got some discord.
Yeah. So
Make
again,
space.
I started with doing
Tampa.
the s- the week 18, or excuse me, week 19 or week 9 on, and taking out all turnovers, and the Bucks were, I think, 6 in EPA per play. And then I was looked at their stats and saw that they obviously, as you know, are a blitz heavy team, but they're still pretty high up there when you take out their EPA per play from blitzing. The shift in the roster, to me, it's a well coached team that focus on defense. Again, they have an offense that's going to support them. I'm trying to
Yeah.
bring up my notes on the roster. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm looking at it. Yeah, the offenses, I think they were in my top 10 offenses. They're probably still going to be good. They're good at keeping the defense off the field. I think they were probably top 3 in time of possession per drive, I would guess, without even looking at the offense. So yeah, that certainly helps a lot.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that most teams that blitz a lot because they have to, and it feels as though the Bucks blitz a lot because they want to, and they feel comfortable doing that. So that was the if what you are doing, to me at least, is not the driver of your success, like that makes me feel good about this Bucks defense going forward.
I
Why do
worry
you hate on
about
my Bucks?
who's the best pass rusher?
Yeah, but I mean, let's go through the rest of the teams in the top. Like, we're not dealing with a whole bunch of pass rushers or a bunch of great pass rushers. Where you got the Browns in this thing, huh?
Yeah,
Where my
but
Cowboys? Where my Cowboys at? You talk about best pass rushers.
just answer the question. Who's the best pass rusher? You didn't answer it.
I think it's Todd Bowles. His schemes are the best pass rusher.
The Hassan Reddick signing really intrigues me. It's a
Yeah, I
one-year deal,
mean,
it's a prove it deal. If he if you can write off last year to, him spending the off season
yeah,
doing samurai cosplay, I don't know. Maybe I Siki liked this secondary.
yeah,
I thought Tyke Smith was good for them as a rookie. Obviously, the safety duo with obviously Antonio Winfield's one of the best
mm,
safeties in the NFL.
right.
It's quite good. Um
N'Kobe Dean. I mean, not N'Kobe Dean. Jamel Dean.
Oh, Jamal Dean, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought they might add a linebacker. They're leaning on Dennis. Yeah, it's an interesting pick. I didn't even
It's all
have
right.
them
You
on
can
my
hate it.
just
You can hate
outside the
it.
top 10. I didn't even have them on just outside the top 10, so I'm surprised to see that, but okay. All right, 8. Man, I don't feel good about this one. I have the Pittsburgh Steelers here.
Oh, see, this is the one where I'm gonna get people pissed off because I had them out of the top 10. It
You had
feels
them out of the top 10. No,
sacrilegious to
no.
put the Steelers out of the top 10. Like they're
I mean,
a defensive team, right?
they were in most stats last year, like, around 10-ish,
Mhm.
so I think you could go either way with Pittsburgh. Obviously, this is still an extremely good defensive front that I got better. They drafted Derek Harmon, who's a pass rushing defensive tackle who I absolutely love. I love for them. I love how he fits into this defense. They have so much depth now on the inside. TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Nate Herbig is or Nick Herbig is assuming TJ Watt plays, which he will. Really, really talented. I have concerns about the secondary.
Mhm.
Um, you bring in Darius Slay. So you got Slay, Porter Jr., Beanie Bishop, who was like weirdly had a lot of interceptions, but like was kind of iffy sometimes in coverage. Minka Fitzpatrick coming off of down year. Um, I have two thoughts on this that I want to talk about to you. Okay, so I would argue that the Steelers defense basically just had a Baltimore Ravens problem. And I looked at because the last time we saw them, they were just
Uh-huh.
getting absolutely demolished, run over by the Baltimore Ravens. So they were 7th in DVOA versus the run overall, and DVOA accounts for opponent strength. So I think that's the system being like, we get it, it's the Ravens. Hilariously, I pulled this because I really wanted to see. So this is a really when the Steelers played teams that were not the Baltimore Ravens, they allowed 3.8 yards per carry, which is the second best in football. The Ravens averaged 6 yards per carry. And in the real stats were the same things shown. They got to figure this out. They really struggled. The linebackers with the Baltimore Ravens like run some of the stuff they were doing with motion, the way they were displacing them. So it wasn't even just like a physicality thing. It
Yeah.
was the moving parts. I really like this defense. I actually think they're still actually like fundamentally sound up front. They have one divisional opponent we have the best offense in football. That's going to be a thorn in their side.
Yeah. I mean, the to your point about the front, like that's like unimpeachable. That is going to make that front alone is going to make their defense pretty good. But the problem with having a Ravens problem is that in your division. So,
Yeah.
like, it's gonna be a disproportionate impact on how your defense is rated at the end of the year.
They really struggled with motion generally over the course of the season. 28th in success rate when teams used motion at the snap. Again, that's dragged by the Ravens games, but it was the problem you saw in other points as well. The other point I wanted to make was they made a hire that really intrigued me. They hired Gerald Alexander to coach the DBs, who has been bounced around the NFL, a few different teams coaching DBs, but he was with Miami when that pass defense was really good, when Minka Fitzpatrick, who's
Mhm.
on the Steelers, was there. And, I've heard by all accounts is like a really, really smart guy. And I think could bring some evolution because this was a very simplistic in terms of the coverages they
Yeah.
played defense as well. I think that to deal with some of these like motion heavy offenses, Baltimore, Kansas City, they need to evolve a little bit on the back end. So I'd be interested in seeing perhaps if that hire, as well as, Daryl Austin, if there's some changes there. But the talent is there. The talent is there, I think.
They're not I mean, that's a lot of time for a team that's not in our top 10.
Who is your eighth
8,
overall team?
Cleveland Browns.
Okay, so I had them
Yeah,
at 11, and I went back and
yeah,
forth and back and forth. This was the team I talked about where I was like, the
right.
offense isn't
I
getting
knew
better.
it, I knew it. As soon as you said it, I knew who you were talking about because
Oh, man.
the defense roster is incredible, adding, Mason Graham to that D line. Yeah, this is,
So let's
And
talk. Okay, so I the because I have a lot of notes of the Browns because I had them and then I pulled them out at the last second. Why did they take such a dip last year? Because last year they went from being like a top 3 unit to being
yeah.
25th in DVOA. But they were 5th in success. They actually were very good against the run. They gave up a ton of big plays. What would you attribute that, and why do you think that they're going to be better this season?
Yeah, I think the talent alone is why I think that they are going to be good. I guess there's a few things you can attribute it to on the field things, you can attribute it to off the field mentality things, which is something you can't address. Like I think that I didn't think about why they would be better than they were last year. I guess I thought of last year as one of the blips that we were talking about, the inconsistencies about defense, and when you have uh the talent that they have, it's going to shine through at some point. And so I didn't put them top 5 obviously, but I thought their talent
Yeah.
would be good enough to get them into the top 10.
Yeah, I think it's totally defensible. The front is just, I mean, it's Myles Garrett, but now you're adding Mason Graham, who it's gonna be interesting, right? Playing in a 4-3. I think like they haven't really been able to get much pass rush in the interior, and when you play next to Myles Garrett, you certainly get your fair share of opportunities. Um, Okoronkwo is still there. He was okay. They added Troy and Shiinka. I missed that signing. Um, so back to my original question, I think there's a couple things that had to do with it. One was they lost Owusu Karamoa,
Mhm.
and I think defenses really attacked the linebacker position. So they drafted Carson Schwessinger, but he's a rookie. They signed Jerome Baker. We'll see. And then, like, schematically, this was we've talked about all these like schemed up defenses, and this was a defense that like kind of did the same thing. They stacked the box, they played a ton of man coverage.
Mhm.
And I think defenses were like kind of good at attacking that. So I think there's a lot of pressure on Jim Schwartz to find some answers to kind of address some of the ways that defenses were going after them last year.
Yeah, I mean, Owusu Kormoa, I know is a highly regarded player and deservedly so, but he also did his own thing a little
Yeah.
bit, which he would make you some plays, he would cost you some plays, which I guess the trade-off is probably net positive, so maybe it doesn't matter. But just like consistent, reliable, I know where you're gonna be, I think would also help for this defense.
Did you watch Schlesinger, the UCLA backer much?
No,
He
not a whole lot.
he it's funny because he actually has some similarities, I would argue, to Owusu Koromoa. He's a little bit light in the pants, flies around the field. I thought he was really, really fun and really, really, like, but he played the position for, like, he was, like, starter for 1 year, so I'm like, "Oh, man, coming to the NFL." I mean, playing behind that line, hopefully,
Yeah.
which has dramatically improved against the run too. Um
Is
It's
is
it's very unique for a defense to finish top 4 in both pass rush win and run stop win the way Cleveland did, and then bottom
yeah.
tier. Martin Emerson was the other thing he really struggled last season, so
Is light in the pants a football only colloquialism? I don't know that I've ever heard anybody describe somebody as light in the pants other than football coaches and football people like you.
I did use it recently when I did a little poop check on Nino, and I told Nick he was light in the pants, and he had no idea what I was talking about, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. You only used it because you're a football person, not like you wouldn't have used that uh in high school or whenever
it's
before
true.
you. Yeah.
Okay,
Anyway,
the Browns at 8. So we both have 2 teams left, right? Or 3 teams left? Wait, so I did let me
I'm about to
I
make
had
a
the
change.
Steelers at 8, and I
Okay.
have 2 teams left, 9
Oh,
and
you do
10.
have the Steelers 8. I thought the Steelers weren't in your top 10. All right, sorry.
No, they were, yeah, yeah.
All right.
So remember I had the Steelers 8. So I had
Yeah.
just to recap, the Seahawks at 7, the Lions 6, the Lions at 7, the Steelers are at 8. I have 2 more teams, one of which is my, like, wild card team, I thought. You also have 2 more teams left, because you had the Bucks at 7, which was
Yeah.
a wait, who did you have 8?
The Browns, we just talked
Oh,
about
the
'em.
Browns. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we both have 2 teams left, and now we've completely gone off of each other's boards. This is great. All right. So at 8, 9, I was deciding between 2 teams that I would actually classify as both teams that are very well coached, that were much better last year statistically than expected, but I wasn't, like, blown away by the personnel,
Mhm.
and I ended up choosing the Packers here.
Ooh, that is exactly who I have at 9 also.
Perfect.
Yeah, they
I
had
was
a lot of
choosing
oh, sorry.
between the Packers and the Chargers. Did the Chargers make your top 10?
No, the Chargers didn't
Okay.
make my top 10.
Ultimately, 'cause do you see what I mean? Like, they're kinda
Yeah.
similar in that, like,
No.
really yeah, right? Like,
Where it's
similar
it's it's a it
markets.
was yeah, where I was looking for something to explain or someone or something to explain why they did well, which is why like they are much higher than 9 by most of the metrics, but this is why they slid because like I don't really understand why they're good and they have a lot of sacks despite not having a ton of pressure, which
Yeah, like,
feels like it could
how
be a
are
little
we doing
fluky.
this? Okay, so great. We're both at the Packers 9. Terrific. The Packers last year are the perfect team to talk about turnovers with. So the
Mhm.
Packers were 4th in EPA per play, 20th in success rate, and they finished 3rd in turnovers, interceptions. So you look at that and you think like that's an alarming thing, right? When you're 4th in EPA per play, which as we discussed earlier, very turnovers make a big difference, but you're 20th in success rate, that suggests like, oh, are they fundamentally sound? But two things made me not terribly concerned. One of those things was narrowing it to the second half of the season,
Yeah.
where suddenly they were 4th in success rate. So it's like, okay, actually, this team became very fundamentally sound and not dependent entirely on turnovers. The other thing that changed my mind was just watching Xavier McKay's turnover or his interceptions. Because yes, interceptions can be fluky and a source of regression, but some players are just better at it, Dominique,
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
others. And he was unbelievable. And he primarily was just playing the deep post where he's got incredible eyes, incredible
Mhm.
range. And I just he was fantastic for them, and I think their, defensive coordinator, we'll talk about Jeff Hafley, figured out the exact right way to use him, and then the other players around him, I think, fell into decent roles as well. But yeah, I'm not saying he's gonna do it again and they're gonna have the same number of interceptions, but I didn't come away from this feeling like this was a defense that got lucky.
Yeah. That's funny because uh, that's why they're at 9 for me and not higher is
Well,
because
yeah, it's
I do think that some of that
dings
is
them
gonna
to a
right, yeah.
degree.
And it's funny, also funny about this Packers defense is I feel like the story of the Packers defense for so many recent seasons has been a really talented defense that I thought would be good, but never
Yeah.
quite was as good. And it's funny now I look at their roster, I'm like, eh, Rashawn Gary, like,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
not super talented, but they were really good last year. So yeah, I think 9 is a good spot for them. It's and still in the upper third, but they're not going to win a bunch of games because of their defense. They're
It's
going to be a good defense.
complementary
Yeah.
football. I think we're both high in the offense as well. So I think they're not gonna be put in super adverse situations. Um, I think, yeah, the front is just good. Wyatt was good last year. Gary's okay. NS, I think Edgerrin Cooper's a star,
Hmm.
who is the, rookie linebacker last year. This is the second year. I think Xavier McKinney's a star.
Yeah.
And I really like the other young, the nickel, and the safety, Evan Williams and Javon Bullets. So I feel really good about the spine of this, and then you got Kenny Clark up front. So I think I feel really good about the spine of the defense. It's funny. I have questions about edge and corner, but I think the spine is really, really good. And I think Jeff Hafley was really good. Let's talk about him for a
Yeah.
second.
Yeah. I remember that name and I remember him coming from Boston College because I remember downplaying how much of an impact he was going to have when they hired him. And it seems like he's had an incredible impact. So, yeah, I'm a Jeff Hafley guy now, I think.
When they hired him, I think the consensus was like, okay, well, this is a guy who played a ton of single high in Boston College. I actually I was looking up. I saw a quote from Matt LaFleur, who he basically said, "Yeah, when we hired him, I thought it was just going to be like uh 4-3 with a bunch of cover three." And
Yeah.
he said, like, and like actually he like really mixed it up in terms of like the coverages. They played way more split safety. Some of the things they were doing in pressures up front, the sims, the games that they were running on the inside. he might be one of those dudes. I think we talked a lot about Jesse Minter last year, but this was the other defense that I think, to your point at the beginning, they actually in the past, it felt like they underplayed their talent level, and it felt like last year they actually played better than it in through scheme in some ways. So the continuity you get there, I think, is another reason why I feel pretty good about this defense staying in the top 10 next year, even if I don't love edge and corner talent.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I just remember getting ready for I guess it was last season, and looking at the Boston College defense, like saying and thinking, oh, this team doesn't have a ton of talent on defense, and they got a coach who wasn't particularly great in college. I don't think they're going to be good, but I guess coaching college kids is different when you can only put so many hours into preparing. It's a little different when you're in the league. You don't have to recruit and whatever.
By the way, like now you've got a lot of college defensive coordinators coming to the NFL and being really good.
Hmm.
Mike McDonald, Jesse Minter, Jeff Halfley. Might be a little bit of a mini trend there. Just
Maybe
something to think about. Like maybe that's something teams need to be looking at more often because of recent success. Just
defensive guys. Yeah, it's fair.
defense, defensive guys. All right, my 10th overall team. This is my biggest surprise.
Okay.
You want to guess?
Big
Just so you
surprise.
know it's not the Chargers.
It's
You
not the
know
Chargers.
it's not the teams you had, the Bucks. It's not the Browns. Last
Yeah,
time.
it I think that it's the Patriots.
No, they were just outside for me. I thought
Okay.
about them. I do like the Patriots.
The I don't know. I've got Patriots at 10. So
Oh, okay,
the
good. I'm excited
Rams.
to talk
If it's
about them.
a big curveball, the Rams. No.
Not the Rams.
All right. Well, I feel like three guesses is enough. Now you just tell me because I don't get any points if I name all the teams.
I chose this team entirely based on the idea that the defensive line can just completely take over games and ruin the lives of
Don't say it.
quarterbacks.
Don't say it.
The New York
Yeah.
Giants!
Oh, I So I was thinking I have to come with a curveball, and I thought that was too absurd. I cannot sell this because I did the same thing. I was like, add Abdul Carter, like they're just gonna give hell to everybody. But I was like, but a top 10 defense, I guess it's possible. But yeah, I considered it.
Here's the thing. They also added some players in the back end that I think could stabilize things. Javon Holland at
Mhm.
safety, Paulson
Yeah.
Adebo, Drew Phillips is really good. I really like the combination of Javon Holland and Tyler Nubin together because I think you can have Nubin playing closer to the box where he's better, personally. But set that aside. This is all about the front. Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau.
Yeah,
It's a nightmare.
that is a nightmare.
And they're deep. I like the D tackles they have. They drafted Darius Alexander as well. You bring in Chauncey Golston. I just eh, every year there's a defense where the pass rush just goes nuclear, and I
Yeah.
feel like why not the Giants?
Yeah,
Why am I crazy to have them at 10?
I think maybe it's just because they're the Giants, but that's
And they
a
were awful last year, by the
yeah,
way. We should start there. But Dexter Lawrence didn't play.
yeah, that's a fair point. And I mean, this does feel like maybe it points out how I in the past would have overvalued defensive fronts and would believe that if your front can be dominant, then everything else around you can not be. I think you have to still be stable. And which, to your point, maybe Holland will bring some stability to it. Maybe Go Terps, my man Banks will become slightly
They're
better at
saying they
corner.
believe in him. They think he's gonna bounce back.
I hope so. I believe in him too. But it's not ridiculous, but these
I
are all
just
great
think
pass rushers.
they're so like, first of all, I think Dexter Lawrence has a case to be
Yeah, Dex
the
Lawrence
best
is great.
defensive player in football, like, he's
Yeah,
up there, and yet you're obviously gonna he's probably gets double teamed without looking it up, right? His double team rates are insane.
I'm sure.
Oh my god, so you're double teaming Dexter Lawrence, and you have to deal with Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, and Kayvon Thibodeau, right? Then this is terrible, it's terrifying. Alright, we don't have I mean, it's a very simplistic case.
I think Abdul Carter will be good. I hope he's good, but also like I feel like not scientific at all, but um super athletic defensive end is I mean Abdul Carter is also really productive. I was thinking that that is a position that
Yeah.
feels like sometimes we miss on, but it doesn't feel like Abdul Carter is going to be a miss. Yeah, they'll be hell up front, but what else are they going to do?
All right. I'm glad you mentioned the Patriots because they were in my like just outside list, and I think if they're a very strong bounce back candidate. What was it that made you put them at 10?
The corners, the pair of corners, and the
Mm,
new coach. Like
mm.
the, I think it's going to be really hard, and a healthy Christian Barmore. Yeah, I think this team is going to be coached well and have the corners in order to play the man coverage or whatever version of coverage that they want to play and blitz if they need to. I think they have that flexibility combined with the new staff. I think they'll be good at defense.
Yeah. So not a group of world beaters, pass rusher. They bring in Harold Landry, but the combination of Christian Barmore and Milton Williams has the potential to
Hmm.
give you dominance there, as well as you have two dominant corners. I mean, this is Gonzalez and Carlton Davis
Yeah, it's a good
put up
pair.
like, I mean, that's up there with the top 3, 4 corner group in the league, 3 at least. So, the other thing is I think this kind of connects these 2 teams. Um, if you get just slightly better offensive play out of New England, they might
Yeah.
not be in the situations they were in last year. That was a ding on the Giants. I'm surprised you didn't bring that up.
I feel like I played that note too many times because it was certainly in the back of my head.
Yeah, right, yeah. They also brought in Robert Spillane, I thought was kind of
Yeah.
like a quietly under the radar, good signing to shore up the linebacker position. Yeah, I'm interested. Last year it was pretty easy to explain what happened. They were just up front. There's just no juice.
Mm,
So I think if I had to poke a hole in the Pats, I think it's like, okay, if Barmore doesn't come back strong, or if Milton Williams ends up being an overplay once you take him out of that Philadelphia defense where he was so productive, then I look at this and I wonder where the rush is coming from. But I
mm.
think at least one of those two players, maybe both, will probably be great. So you got like enough depth there. I also like they drafted Brian Swinson out of LSU, who was a fun watch as well. So yeah, I think they clearly chose to invest heavily on that side of the ball this offseason. I don't think Mike Vrabel is going to be messing around when it comes to this defense. So I do like them as a bounce back candidate. I think it's a good pick. They're definitely the safer pick than the Giants.
No, the Giants was a lot more fun pick though. Uh, I really I couldn't convince myself to pick the Rams. I really wanted to get the Rams in there just because I wanted to talk about Puna Ford
Corners.
and Jared Verse. Yeah, the corners too, but those two in particular would have been fun to talk about. But
I
yeah,
was
they're
thinking
not.
the corners are why I could get
Yeah,
the
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
Rams.
I mean, everybody's has. Well, I feel like
Corners,
maybe.
this is not a lot of
Yeah,
corners around the
yeah.
league.
It's always hard.
Uh, okay, so my teams outside were the Patriots, who you mentioned, the Browns were the last 2 out for me. I considered the Bills, who are always, like,
Hmm.
just good, and they also invested in their defense, and also they benefit from the offense. Did you consider the Chiefs at all?
Yeah, I mean, I not seriously. I think I considered the
Yeah,
Bills and the Chiefs. I wanted to, but I just didn't. They didn't have the talent to me to get there. And the Bills, the same thing. They made some. I mean, we brought in Bosa, but he's older and unhealthy. So yeah, they still never had the talent, but still perform fairly decently well. If they ever got the talent that they needed on defense, then I think they'd be
since
really good.
their fans will likely be screaming in the comments, did we disrespect the Chargers?
They got fans now? Are we not doing that joke anymore where we say the Chargers don't have fans? Or is that too old? We done
All
with that?
3 of them are in the our mentions right now. No, because they were so well coached last
Yeah,
year. I think though, I just looked at the roster and I was like,
yeah,
"Ooh, I just don't think they're." I think that the team will be helped by some offensive improvements, so that could factor into it. But like or Khalil Mack's a year older. You lose. I think like losing Puna was sneaky big for
yeah.
them. That I actually didn't love that loss. Corner groups just okay. I don't know. The other bounce back candidate I'll highlight, just out of maybe this is a little bit of a curveball, is the other team in New York, the Jets. I think could
Mhm.
surprise some folks and
Yeah.
bounce back in a big way with better coaching.
Yeah, I mean, I consider the Jets, but it's hard to. I mean, they still have plenty of talent, but
All right. To recap my list: 1, Denver; 2, Houston; 3, Baltimore; 4, Philadelphia; 5, Minnesota; 6, Seattle. Can't believe you got Seattle so much higher than me. 7, scrolling. 7. Oh, I skipped one. I had 7. I had 8, Pittsburgh. Detroit.
Mhm.
8, Pittsburgh. 9, Green Bay. 10, the New York Giants. Dominique, who is your top 10?
Philly, Seattle, Baltimore, Denver, Houston, Minnesota, Tampa Bay, Cleveland, Green Bay, New England.
There you have it. Dominique's top 10. Tampa is probably the biggest surprise to me. I did not see that one coming. I like
Curveball.
it.
Get
I like it.
excited.
I didn't see it coming. All right. Well, that's it for now. But if you guys don't already, check out Dominique's excellent podcast, The Domonique Foxworth Show, wherever you get your pods. You're done with the NBA now. So is it back to football for you over there?
Yeah, back to football. First Sunday to nap, then back to football.
No, you can also check out, if you are watching the show Love Island, my television show recap show with David Dennis Jr. It's called Viewer Discretion. Wherever you get your pods, it's also available on YouTube at youtube.com/@MinaKimes. Starting next week, we are switching cadence to going twice a week again. We are doing the power ranking, the Power Hour pods that I did last summer. I'm going to do those again, and we're going to be starting our division previews. First division is going to be with Robert Mays. I won't reveal which division it is, but go check that out. In the meantime, thank you to everyone at Omaha Productions for working on this show. Kirsten Specky, Anthony Jimenez, Owen Saylor, Jack Foster, Tucker Tashjian, and I'll see you guys next week.